The silent apartment. Derek stood outside the building, his suitcase in one hand and a crumpled lease agreement in the other. The apartment was nothing special, just a bland, beige building tucked between a coffee shop that always seemed closed and a dusty old bookstore that probably hadn't seen a customer in years. But that was fine by him. After years of chaos, noise, and deadlines, he was ready for a little peace and quiet. The landlord, an elderly man with glasses perched low on his nose, had handed over the keys without much of a chat. Derek wasn't much of a talker himself, so it suited him. As he walked down the narrow hallway to apartment 3B, he noticed how quiet the place was. Too quiet. Almost. No sound of TV, no muffled conversations, no footsteps echoing from upstairs, just the faint hum of the building's heating system. When he opened the door, the apartment felt like a blank canvas, bare walls, empty rooms, and a single window overlooking the alley below. There was something oddly comforting about it. No clutter, no mess, just space for him to start fresh. Derek set down his suitcase and let out a long breath. It felt like the first time he'd really relaxed in years. That night, as he lay in bed, he noticed it again, the absolute silence, the kind that almost felt heavy, like a blanket pressing down on him. He shrugged it off, telling himself it was just part of the adjustment to a new place. But when he woke up at 2:13 a.m., something felt off. He wasn't sure what had woken him up, but his eyes snapped open, and he felt a chill run down his spine. Then, he heard it, a faint, almost inaudible whisper. It was so quiet. He wasn't even sure if he was imagining it. He strained his ears, trying to make out the sound, but it was gone. Maybe it was the wind outside, he thought, or the building settling. But as he lay there, staring at the ceiling, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more. Over the next few days, Derek tried to settle into a routine. He went to work, came back, cooked dinner, and tried to relax. But every night, at around the same time, he'd wake up, and the whispering would return. It was never loud or clear, just a soft murmur that seemed to come from the walls. He tried to ignore it, telling himself it was just his imagination, but curiosity started to get the better of him. One evening, as he was washing dishes, he noticed something strange. There was a small crack in the wall, just above the kitchen counter. It was barely noticeable, but when he pressed his ear against it, he thought he could hear something, a faint, rhythmic tapping. It was so subtle, he almost missed it. He stepped back, his heart starting to race, and quickly convinced himself it was nothing. But that night, the whispering was louder. Derek sat up in bed, straining to hear, and this time, he could almost make out words. It was like someone was speaking just on the other side of the wall, their voice muffled and distorted. He got up, grabbed a flashlight, and started inspecting the apartment. He checked every room, every corner, but found nothing unusual. Just as he was about to give up, he remembered the crack in the kitchen wall. With a sudden rush of determination, he grabbed a small hammer from his toolbox and started gently tapping around the crack. The wall felt solid at first, but then the hammer hit a spot that sounded different, hollow. His pulse quickened as he chipped away at the plaster, revealing a small gap behind it. He shined the flashlight into the darkness, squinting to see what was inside. There was a narrow, hidden space between the walls, just wide enough for someone to squeeze through. And there, tucked away in the corner, was a dusty, old notebook. Derek carefully pulled it out, wiping the cover clean. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. He hesitated for a moment, then opened it. The pages were filled with shaky, hurried handwriting, detailing strange, unnerving things. It was like a diary, but the entries were disjointed and rambling. They talked about hearing whispers, seeing shadows move when no one was there, and feeling like someone was always watching. Derek's hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. The last entry was short, written in large, uneven letters. "They are here. They watch. Don't listen." Derek's breath hitched as he read the words. The room felt colder, and the silence around him was deafening. He looked around, half expecting to see someone standing in the shadows, but he was alone. He set the notebook down and tried to calm himself, but then he heard the whispering, louder than it had ever been before, echoing from every corner of the apartment. It was like a chorus of voices, all overlapping, all saying things he couldn't quite understand. Derek's heart pounded in his chest as he stumbled back, trying to find the source of the sound. And then, through the whispering, he heard a single, clear voice, "Get out." Derek froze. The voice was calm, almost gentle, but there was no mistaking the urgency in it. He grabbed his keys, his wallet, and ran out of the apartment, not stopping until he was outside, breathing in the cool night air. He glanced up at the dark windows of apartment 3B, half expecting to see someone looking back at him, but the building was still, silent, and empty. The next day, Derek returned to the apartment with the landlord. He didn't say anything about the notebook or the voices, just asked if anyone had lived there before him. The landlord hesitated, then admitted that the previous tenant had left suddenly, without a word. He wouldn't say more, but Derek could see the unease in his eyes. That night, Derek packed up his things and left. He didn't care about the lease or losing his deposit. He just needed to get out. As he drove away, he glanced at the building one last time, and for a brief moment, he thought he saw a shadow move behind the window of apartment 3B. But when he looked again, it was gone, and the building stood there, as silent and unremarkable as ever.